Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Things Delivered. We're here just to connect with you, our community. And since you can talk to us live, you can tweet at us with the hashtag SparkPostLive. Gives us a chance to talk to you and answer questions and get some virtual FaceTime with you, which we all love. My name is Mary. I'm our community manager here at SparkPost, and I'm with two other folks on our team today, Chris Wilson and Rich Leland. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
My name is Chris Wilson. I'm a solution architect here at SparkPost, and I work with a lot of our on-premise customers, but I also do a lot of things that enable our customers in the SparkPost cloud.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
And I'm Rich Leland, Director of Growth Engineering here at SparkPost. Also maintain the Python client library, and my focus is on sparkpost.com and our developer relations.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich. So last time, Adrian and I were here talking a little bit about who we are and what kinds of projects we work on regularly. This time, we're going to dig into a few of those projects and tell you a little more about them, specifically our API and our official SparkPost CLI. And again, if you have any questions throughout the broadcast today, feel free to tweet at us at SparkPostLive. So let's jump right in. One of the things that we like to say here at SparkPost is that we are API first. Rich, can you talk about that a little bit and what that means?
Yeah, sure. So our APIs power everything. So everything that we build from our web UI to internal calls that we have, they're all driven by a desire to make the API a foundation. Right, and to make that really the first thing that we think of, right? We're the first consumers of our API, so we want to make it really solid for our community, and that's the way that we do that is we have an internal API governance team, and so we have documented standards for our APIs, and anytime we have something new or something that needs to be adjusted, we work as a team together and we run any changes that we have as an engineering team through the API governance team. And we also take we document things first. So anytime we have a project that comes in, we look at what we're trying to accomplish, and then the first thing we do before we write any lines of code is we document the API. So we'll document out what all the requests and responses should look like, and then we review that as a team, and we say, all right, good to go, and that's when we get started. That approach has really helped us rapidly iterate and all be on the same page and keep things consistent across the API.
Awesome, thanks. So why does it matter that we are API driven and that we are API first? I know you touched on that a little bit, but why specifically with SparkPost does that matter for us?
Yeah, I mean, we understand how important the ease of use for APIs is, right? And so, we want to focus on making that a great experience. So, if we're always thinking about, well, how does it feel from an end user standpoint? What do we need ourselves when we're building our web UI or internal tools, or wrapping our API with client libraries? We think about it from a user standpoint, right? And I think that's really what it's all about. If we focus on the API first, we can really build anything on top of that we want to. And it also drives like future development. When we're building a tool or working on the web UI, we see things that are absent in the API that we might not have thought about, and so that helps us get back to, okay, well, we need this feature, so other people probably need it too, and we just go back and we refine and continue to improve those APIs. So I think overall it helps with just the general user experience when it comes to the API itself.
Well, and like you said, we use our API as well. So when we notice things that are going on, it helps us notice things that the community might be dealing with and then interact with them on a more real basis of, hey, what are the issues that you're dealing with? Hey, we saw this thing. Is that something that would help you as well? And that's one of the things that I love about our community team is that we're we're great with reaching out to folks and making sure that we're solving those problems either before they see them or implementing features that we know would be helpful for us and therefore be helpful for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are only one user, right? So it's really important to continue to get that feedback from the community, and we use that and discuss that feedback all the time. So it's very much appreciated.
Cool. So can you talk a little bit about how we approach our architecture?
Yeah, sure. So we have we now have 16 APIs that are publicly accessible and documented in our API docs, and so there's a lot of different approaches you can take to building a large complex system, and the approach that we take is just let's break those down into their individual tasks. Really kind of like a microservice architecture. So all those APIs are completely separate code bases, and they're tested and packaged and deployed independently. So on any given day, we might deploy changes to 4 different APIs, or we might do 10 changes in one, or we might do 1 change in all of them. But it really helps to keep things independent and separate concerns there, because that, number one, it makes deployments less risky, right? Like if we're just deploying one change in one API, it's a lot less risky to just push that small chunk out. It goes out a lot faster. The tests are run through a lot faster, and then it also means that you're not deploying an entire large code base again. So it's really helped us, be able to iterate and respond to feedback and push things out and feel comfortable, when that we've got each of these independent code bases tested, and when they deploy, our risk is low.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So, hey, Chris, what are some of the cool things that you've seen developers do with our API? I know you've interacted with some of the folks on our community Slack and helped build some things out, but what are some of the fun projects that you've seen?
Certainly being able to use our content template API, where you can do these kind of iteration through information and build out these rich emails that have lots of information in there, and it's unique per one of the recipients in the recipient list. I really enjoy seeing that. The webhooks, where they're getting nearly real-time information coming back about what the state of this message is. Has it been delivered, and who's opened and clicked on it, and being able to ingest that into their data and analytics system, and being able to crunch that data and churn it and produce their own kind of reports on what they're looking for. Very cool. Rich, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen some pretty cool stuff. Some of it internal. Our developer advocate Adrian, he recently built a pretty cool little app. So one of the coolest things I think is our we don't just send mail. We actually are an inbound mail receiver as well, and so you can set up relay webhooks. And what's cool about those to me is it really just opens up the potential. So when an email comes in, it passes that through to a webhook endpoint, and then you can kind of take that message and do whatever you want with it, right? So some of the cool things we've seen is like, adding songs to a Spotify playlist. I thought was pretty cool. We've done some stuff around charity, like voting for a charity for donations. And then there was at one of the hackathons, and I think we've got some of this info on our blog as well. But there was a company called Dwellwell. Now I don't know if they used inbound relay, but they were doing some work around affordable housing in San Francisco, and had a nice tie-in with our service. And then what was the other one? The email AI was pretty cool, where there was a group that basically worked with Watson to analyze the tone of emails before they were sent. So you could basically send in an email, and they would pass it through Watson, analyze the tone of the email, and say, hey, this looks good, or hey, it might be interpreted in this other way. So I think we've all kind of been in a position where we hear people inferring tone from emails, or when you write things, you might not think about the tone of your email. So I thought that was a really neat use of our service for sure, and combining it with another awesome service.
Yeah, I think all of us could use that every once in a while, huh? One of the cool things that we just saw someone do down at SD Hacks a couple weeks ago, they set up a relay webhook combined with a few other databases in the background that you could essentially play chess back and forth via email. And so, you know, you'd initiate a game, and then someone would say, "Oh, move, you know, E1 to E2," and so it would make that move and then display the new chessboard in the email that was sent to your opponent.
Yeah, it's like email Zork.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's all sorts of cool things that we've seen people do, both with our inbound relays, our relay webhooks, as well as just the documentation and stuff around their email metrics. So what about webhooks? Chris, I know you mentioned this a little bit, but what's the purpose? What's the reason people might want to use that in addition to the API?
Webhooks can give you a push sort of event. So the API is really good. You can look at message events, you can look at metrics and this kind of thing and do like a polling sort of thing to see what the state of this message is. The webhooks become really valuable when you want to know something changed and it just changed and I didn't need to poll to have that happen. So you can push it into you know, the customer or whatever who's working with this can be delivered right into their server to an HTTP interface, and they could see right then and there, here's the injection that happened. It was going to these recipients. Here it was delivered, and or it bounced, and here's why it bounced, and you can get all of this real time coming right into the external interface.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good for, and we provide a lot of data in those, right? So it's really good. You know, we have our own UI that we provide for everybody, and it has a lot of functionality and a lot of ways you can slice and dice that data, but we can't possibly solve every use case, right? So, you know, whether you want to warehouse that data and for analysis later, or just do some different type of crunching that we aren't doing, or you want to be able to respond to events as they happen, right? Then yeah, webhooks are the way to go. Push that data out as the events are happening.
And you know, one of the questions that I get asked a lot on these kinds of things is, you know, it's great getting all this information coming back at you know, you can ingest it, but a lot of times somebody needs some sort of reference that helps them to say, this piece of information really is tied back to this other database's piece of information. So as you're doing your transmissions, you can actually embed meta information that on each of the webhooks coming back, whether it's a click and open or it's a delivery or a bounce, you can have your own reference foreign keys in those termination points. So it becomes really easy for you to kind of say, this piece of data is really connected off to this piece of data in my database, and join those together really simply. And I think, you know, as people are starting out with SparkPost, they overlook that super powerful solution to a problem and start trying, you know, working themselves into some other way to do it. Then all of a sudden they realize that it's a light switch, and then all of a sudden they're off and running and really solving the problems that they really want to solve.
Awesome. I love that we have those types of things that people can hook back into, right? We're like, cool, you're looking for this information? Well, you can get it from the UI or the API or the webhooks, or you can do these things. And it seems very customizable depending on what people's needs are, which is awesome.
Right.
Cool. Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're really proud of at SparkPost is that we have people throughout the company who are contributing to the community efforts and building solutions to issues that our customers are running into. So it's not just our developer relations team that's handling those things on a daily basis. A good example of this is you, Chris. So you've long been one of those people who willingly steps in and helps out wherever you can. I know a little while ago you built out a CLI tool that hooks into our webhooks and our deliverability metrics and suppression lists, which makes it a lot easier for folks to run those queries direct from their command line. Can you tell us a little bit about why you built it and what that process was?
Sure. You know, actually, the reason I was working on a Java library, which is available in GitHub as well, and I found myself, as folks were internally and externally were asking questions about how can I do this simply? You know, I need to get this piece of information into a spreadsheet or something like this. You know, I was working up little command line tools to run in Java, but you know, typing Java and class path and all that stuff to get that to work in Java isn't always the simplest thing. It's great in a server environment where you have all your dependencies kind of pre-laid out, but where you're asking an end user to run that, sometimes it's a little more tricky. So Dave Gray, another colleague of ours, was working on a Golang library that's also available in GitHub. And I was looking for something, well, people who was running on Windows ask me questions, people running in Linux are asking me questions, and people who are running on a Mac are asking me questions. And what can I do that's kind of like Java that would run everywhere, but I want to be able to have a simple tool, and if you've used AWS, you're probably familiar with their command line tools, something kind of along those lines where I can have this nice tool that works across all these platforms, and it really is just a matter of executing a few command lines. I can run it in Perl, I can run it in Bash, I can run it just to get data into a spreadsheet. And as I started thinking through it, Go, which is what it's written in, seemed like the perfect solution to the problem. I already had the library there written by Dave, so I took and I put a command line on top of it. So it's an example of, this API works very well, to the server. So I can wrap that, whether it's in a web service, or I can wrap it on a command line tool, or I can wrap it in another application and accomplish and solve these problems that folks were having that are very specific to some need that they had.
Awesome. So I noticed a lot of the features in the CLI look like they're wrappers around the current API, which we just said. So what does that mean, first of all, for those of us who don't understand how APIs are written and what the wrappers mean? But then also, what's the purpose behind writing it like that?
Sure. So many of the things that you, like doing transmissions and things, you could resort to doing SMTP, or you could do a REST interface. The REST interface is the API that works really well with SparkPost. So wrapping that API, what we're saying is we're wrapping these HTTP post requests with some application layer to make it really easy. So we're making, one input, transform it into some output, which in this case is an HTTP REST output, to trigger some event within SparkPost and get some piece of data back, and then parsing that data and presenting it in the user interface in the way that they want it presented.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd add to that, like for the wrappers particularly, like one of the big drivers around that is there's a lot of commonality to the types of requests that you make. And so, whether it's setting headers or user agents or, other parameters that you want to pass through to those API endpoints, it can become cumbersome to kind of repeat that over and over and over again. But also, when you're using a particular language, it's just so easy to write something against any given API in the language right? As opposed to writing something yourself from scratch. It's like you don't have to do the work, but you also have a familiar API within your language that you can use.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a step up, right? Is instead of starting to think about how do I start implementing all of the stuff underneath the covers, I can start at, well, here's somebody already implemented all of this stuff that interfaces with SparkPost. Now I can really think about, here's the problem I want to solve, and not need to worry about all of that foundation because it's already there for you and ready to go.
Very cool. So briefly for our listeners, if you've got any questions for us, be sure to tweet at us with the hashtag SparkPostLive, or you can hop on our community Slack at slack.sparkpost.com and ask us questions there as well. So talking briefly again about the differences between doing something with a CLI versus the API versus our web interface and our web UI. What are some of the motivators for using each of those, and what are some of the situations that we would use those differently?
Yeah, I can feel that one. So yeah, we have a couple of different ways to interface API, SMTP, web UI. It really just depends on what your personal goals are, right? So there might be some people that like you might want to only build the product, and you're not necessarily the person that's looking at and analyzing all the data as a result, right? So in that case, it's you're just making API calls, right? And maybe you have a marketing team that's looking at the analytics data. if you're using API, if you want to talk about like API versus SMTP, I think there's probably like some personal business decisions that are made there, right? Like when you use SMTP, you have you have a standardized protocol, right? And so SMTP is the same mostly across any service. So if you're looking for things like having fallbacks that are easy to implement, right? Like one SMTP server is unavailable, you fall back to another one. Vendor lock-in, right? Like if you don't want to, commit to one particular vendor, it's really easy. SMTP is very portable, right? But you don't get all the power of what you can get in the API. Some good examples of that are like our templating, right? And so SMTP, you form the message on your end and send it through, right? API, you can create a really complicated dynamic template and then merge that with some recipient level data and send that through the API. You can also do a lot of, it depends on how much automation you want to do too, right? So as I said earlier, we have 16 public APIs. So if you want to automate configuring things in your SparkPost account, that's totally doable with API. SMTP is really, I need to send an email, right? And then the web UI, for some people, it's going to be something they visit regularly. And for others, it's going to be, I'm going to go in there, configure my sending domains, set some things on my account and roll out. And for some people, they might have like just the only group of people that need to get in there and ever touch the billing section are the finance people, right? So I think it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what your business goals are.
Very cool. Thanks. So anything else, favorite things about our API or favorite things that you have built internally, things that you would like to add before we sign off here today?
Well, for me, one of the things that kept coming up is, we have some person coming from some other service provider that sends email, and, suppression lists come in lots of different kinds of forms where, people have decided not to subscribe or the email address is just bad and this kind of thing. And it really kept coming up as, what's the best way for getting this into SparkPost in our case. And so this CLI, with a little bit of work was very easy to take, this suppression list from whatever format this is from this other provider and basically run it, import this suppression list into SparkPost basically, and just have it go right on up and be ready to run, for them very seamlessly.
Very cool. Rich, what about you? What's one of your favorite things that you've had a chance to build out for our community?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things has been the building out the client libraries. And not just because it's like, I get to use Python or I get to use PHP, whatever. It's more about the contributions and the direct feedback that we get. We've already done like a major refactoring of our PHP library based on community feedback. We're working on refactoring the Node library. And I just think that building those tools, even though they're relatively simple from an engineering standpoint, it's the interaction with everyone is awesome, and just getting that direct feedback I think is so cool. And the contributions, I'm still always blown away every time I see a pull request come in and somebody's taken their time out of their day to make a contribution to one of those for us. So I'd have to say client libraries hands down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something really fun to work on. It just amazes me where somebody says, well, here's a language that you don't have a library for. And, somebody like Darren who goes off and builds up this really great library and wraps it around C# or something like this, that now all of a sudden, not only does it when I get a pull request, but when I see people even going and taking even another initiative like that, it's just amazing, the folks that are out there and have such a passion for this and willing to contribute in that way.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fantastic contributions from our community, and it's been awesome to see. Well, cool. And that's actually a perfect segue, because next month we're going to be talking about our client libraries and how we put them together and some of the contributions we've gotten from the community. And things that we're looking for from you and how you can help us out. So if you've got any questions in the meantime, hop over to our community Slack at slack.sparkpost.com, or as always, you can talk to us on Twitter, either at SparkPost or at SparkPostDev. We'd be happy to hear from you, see what you'd like us to talk about or what questions you have for us in the meantime. But thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Again, I'm Mary. I'm the community manager here at SparkPost, and I was joined by Rich Leland and Chris Wilson. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks, community.
Bye.
Bye.